we've actually lost a generation of financial fitness, that we're not teaching this next generation around, the importance of diversification, or, what different asset classes or tax strategies can be, and how to really prosper over a lifetime. We're very much around instant gratification or quick wins, or, the easy bet.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how on where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You will hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested. Hi, freedom fighters. What do Aristotle, Einstein and Arnie all have in common? They all learn the same way. So how do you learn? What do you think is the best way to learn? Do you just work hard, reinvent the wheel and try to figure things out yourself? Or do you turn to good books or Google searches, or do you seek advice from others? Well, in my book, The Freedom Formula, I talk about the importance of leverage of other people's expertise to fast-track your results. But I cite an interesting quote by Douglas Adams. Human beings who are almost unique in having the ability to learn from the experience of others are also remarkable for their apparent disinclination to do so. Now, in my ongoing study of sustainable success over the last 35 years, one of the common threads I've found is that people who make the biggest impact in any area of endeavour all do so with the help of mentors or coaches. The greatest investors, inventors, innovators, entrepreneurs, pioneers, artists, sportspeople, musicians, you name them, every single one of them stood on the shoulders of their mentors. Almost everyone I look up to and respect all have mentors. Let me give you a couple of quick examples. Bill Gates had Ed Roberts. Warren Buffett had Benjamin Graham. Oprah had Mary Duncan. Steve Jobs had Robert Friedland. Mark Zuckerberg had Steve Jobs. Now, there's a great example of paying the learning cycle forward. Michael Jordan had Phil Jackson. Aristotle, Einstein, Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk. The list just goes on and on. All of the world's game changers, innovators and achievers have catapulted their learning and their results through their mentors, the greats that have gone before them. So what is a mentor? Why do all successful people use them? What makes a good mentor? How can a good mentor help you? And what has mentoring got to do with investing? These are all the questions that today's guest, a recognised mentoring specialist, will answer for you and motivate you to get invested in good mentors as a springboard to your ongoing achievement. Jason Back is the founder and director of Broker Essentials, and he's a well-known figure in the finance industry and a very sought-after media commentator. Jason's a thought leader and a subject matter expert in the mortgage broking industry. Jason's developed a really unique coaching, training, consulting and facilitation mentoring business that helps service professionals achieve best practice and develop the habits of high-performance businesses. It helps you grow your performance and your business by focusing on sales through service excellence. He takes you through the behaviours of the nation's best businesses by focusing on process, business management and the client journey. Prior to this, he was the Managing Director of the Australian Lending and Investment Centre, or ALIC, and was instrumental in taking ALIC to the forefront of the mortgage broking industry. He's got over 27 years' experience in the finance sector, and he's worked across senior sales, distribution, many management roles for ANZ, and he's provided financial advice and services on behalf of financial planning, equity trading platforms, private banking, lending, and retail distribution brands. Let me just share a very brief taste of his career accolades. In 2014, 15, 16 and 17, ALEC was voted the top independent brokerage of the year by Mortgage Professional Australia. They were Australia's best brokerage in 2014-15 at the Australian Mortgage Awards, and the MFAA awarded them similar in 2016 and 18. Jason's also been a finalist as a thought leader for the last 3 years running. So for another really engaging and inspiring session where you'll hear lots of absolutely immediately usable gold, please enjoy this really energising chat with Jason Back. Welcome, Freedom Fighters. Well, the world's most successful investor, Warren Buffett, is famous for saying that the only thing we learn from history is that we don't learn from history. So what's the best way that we can learn from history? Well, for me, it's through good mentors. Every successful person I've read about or talked to, from Gandhi to Oprah to Steve Jobs, all attribute their success to good mentors. So today, we've got the pleasure of speaking to a highly awarded mentoring specialist, someone I've admired for years, and someone I recently had the pleasure of sharing the stage with at the Advisor Academy Learn from the Leaders session. So welcome, and let's get invested, Jason Beck.
Hey Bushy, how are you?
Really good, mate. Really looking forward to having a deep dive this morning. Mate, for those listeners who haven't come across you on their travels, can you give us a bit of a rundown to start with on who you are and what you're doing and where you're heading currently?
Sure. Look, it's been a bit of a journey for me. I'm a West Australian boy by birth. Moved to Melbourne back in 1997. I'd applied for a job when I was at the ANZ back in Perth, and it got down to the final two candidates. Found out on the Tuesday that I wasn't successful for this financial planner associate position and left for Melbourne on a Saturday. So packed up my bags and took a 5-year contract with the ANZ to come over here and start a new division with about 100 other people from around the country.
Yeah. And
I thought I'll stick it out for a year, and that was sort of 5 years later. I was still here, and by then I'd met my first wife, and basically that was 20 plus years ago. So I've been in Melbourne ever since. Spent 20 years at ANZ in total through a variety of different roles, and it was a very exciting journey for me. From my private banking days, I was a director there. I did some time in the e-trade and margin lending sort of area with the equity platforms.
Yeah,
I was a financial planner for quite a number of years, and I'd done quite well out of that. And then started moving into things like business development manager roles, taking on leadership roles, and then finished up as the head of distribution for one of the retail divisions before I left in 2012. I was lucky enough to get a package after 20 years. I spent some time getting my golf handicap down to 8, which was lovely. When you get to play a little bit more, taking my daughter to school every day, spending more time surfing. And after sort of several months and doing a little bit of consulting, some good friends of mine, Mark Davis and Kemet Agent, had asked me to come in and have a look at their business, the Australian Lending Investment Centre. I was looking at a capabilities assessment, a cultural review, process re-engineering piece for them.
Yeah.
I did that for sort of 6 months, and at the end of that term, they'd asked me to stay on and take on the managing director role. So I did that for several years, and we were obviously quite successful and had a lot of fun along the way, lots of tears, but lots of celebrations as well. And then about 3 years ago, while I was still the MD there, I created a new company called Broker Essentials, which was a training and a development mentor platform for brokers that are looking to scale their business in the mortgage space. So I'm now doing that full time. I left ALEC in December last year. The boys were a little bit disappointed, but left the company and now a full time consulting into the Australian mortgage broker space.
Fantastic, man. Look, covered a lot of turf there. What I'm keen to do is revisit a little bit of that in the context of the key change points that happened along that journey, and get you to sort of expand on why you decided to make the decision to make those changes. So why financial planning, why ANZ, why move to Melbourne, just so that we've got a sense of your motivations and the thinking on what made you decide to invest your time, energy and skills in those things on that journey?
Yeah, I think when I left when I left Perth in '97, the decision was relatively simple in that sense of, Perth was a smaller base for the financial services firms. I was ambitious. I really wanted to focus on my career and develop where I was going. And, I didn't feel that, in that space there, that was one role going in WA at that time. And obviously the person, I remember, Rowan Gorringe, was successful in the role, and rightfully so. At the time, he was more qualified and more suited to the role. So, I looked to inspiration and going, well, if I move to a larger state with more of those roles, surely there's more of a chance that I'd be successful. I took on a role in the interim that I was... I'll say I was desperately unhappy in. It wasn't a role in my career that I look back on fondly in the sense of the type of work I was doing.
Okay.
It was very process orientated. It was a back office division doing a certain lending profile client. Nothing exciting. And I do remember walking to work a couple of times because I was living in the city, basically in tears, thinking, what have I done? I've moved to the other side of the country. I'm 23, 24 years of age. This isn't working out how I wanted. And at the time, I had a mentor, or in fact, it was my flatmate as well, Jackie Andrews, who was an ANZ executive, a leadership coach. And I remember her, and I've still got it today, she wrote on a stress ball for me. I can't remember the words, verbatim, but if I remember it, something like it, this is just a stepping stone on your journey to the next role. And she wrote this on this stress ball for me. And it was quite a poignant change in my career around really focusing on not just what's in front of you, but starting to look a little bit down the track as well. Mm-hmm. And that, I'd gone and met with the right connections at the bank around what they were doing in this space for the job that I wanted. I was creating the personal brand with these people. I was making it well known that that's where I wanted to go, and that was the journey that I was on. So that was a really good starting point for me. And I was successful when those roles did come up, straight away into that financial planning associate role, and that led me on the path down that education piece that I've been on effectively for the last 20 years.
The financial planning itself, let's go back right to the beginning there. Why financial planning? What attracted you into that space?
With financial planning, it's a very tough industry in this country because for how the industry is actually structured, especially when it comes to whether you're an IFA, an independent financial advisor, or you work under a licensee arrangement, product sales has been a really confusing part of what it forms in the financial planning industry, i.e. a client comes in and they see you and they feel like they need to buy something, and we feel like we have to sell something to make a commission or a sale or create revenue. But financial planning in its purest form, and not a lot different really from mortgage broking, is all about education. And I feel that for really the last, I'm 45, so I feel like when I sort of came through my education and my background and my upbringing, that we've actually lost a generation of financial fitness, that we're not teaching this next generation around, the importance of diversification or, what different asset classes or tax strategies can be and how to really prosper over a lifetime. We're very much around instant gratification or quick wins or, the easy bet. So financial planning to me was very much around taking customers on a journey of education through, birth, retirement, death of your assets, that these multi-generational wealth creation strategies where the prosperity you can create today can last for generations after you're gone. So that ideology really excited me, and that was a journey that I was really happy to be on and taking clients on that journey. The challenge obviously being in a banking environment was the challenge between revenue and customer satisfaction. But banks have really struggled across the board, and obviously the recent Royal Commission will show that the fee for no service is a really good example of banks not truly understanding financial planning, that the revenue streams can take a year and 2 years and 3 years before they drop, because the exchange in value up front is a trust exchange. And it's an education exchange, and it's a content exchange. But content, the best content, and this is what I'm learning from people like the Matt Churches of the world and the Pete Cooks, is you give away your best content for free. That's where you can really gain and value your customer relationships. The customer will buy what you're selling when you've earned the right to sell them what you're selling. So the financial planning stuff I really enjoyed. I love the education piece around it. The different asset classes, obviously, the challenge, obviously, being from a banking perspective again, is that you're limited in relation to things like direct property, direct securities like shares, etc. So, forming relationships with buyers agents and property agents, stockbrokers, accountants, and stuff was something that I really enjoyed doing as well. So we had that hub and spoke model where we had a trusted group of people, all there for the same reason, to delight and service that client and take them on that journey. So it was a really great time of my life.
Yeah, that vision, Jason, which I find is quite rare in this day and age, that can see that the need to look to the future and what do I need to be doing now, what do I need to be investing in now that's going to help me secure and sustain that. Where does that come from for you? Because it obviously was there at a very early age. Is that something that's come out of your family upbringing? Is it just something that you just found you had a natural inclination to? Can you sort of talk to us about that?
I think you're right there. I think there's definitely something coming from my family. I come from an English-Irish background, so Australian father's side, sort of fifth, sixth generation Australian, but mother's side, English-Irish descent, immigrated to Australia, way back in the day. My grandfather was lieutenant colonel for the British Army, so very not about prim and proper, but very clear, very decisive, very clear visions around how things are done. I mean, this is this is 30, 40 years ago, so in a different world back then. But I think that gave me I'm very appreciative of the values that were instilled on me by my family around how, whether that be anything from being chivalrous to please and thank yous to hard work and the ethics that sit behind that. I started working when I was about 14 at Red Rooster, as a kitchen hand, you're getting burnt every second night in the fryers and the chicken rotisseries, but I loved it. I loved the hard work. I loved I liked the reward for effort, that the decisions I got to make through the exchange of my time for output meant that I could go and buy a new surfboard. I purchased my first car with cash. I worked weekends and holidays at Rottnest Island. Funny enough, they had a store over there. So on long weekends and on holidays, and at 14, 15 years of age, I was heading over there on my own to work with the crew and the staff over there, and I got to surf in the mornings, I got to work in the afternoons,
nice.
And the night times, and I was building something that I was really proud of, and I enjoyed the balance between what my passions were, so surfing at the time, and in the hard work that came along with it. So.
Yeah, so along that journey, let's expand a bit more on your personal investment journey then, because you're learning all of the fantastic techniques in terms of building your own wealth over time, and you're associating yourselves with that hub and spoke model that you spoke about in relation to exposure to key people in each and every asset class. Talk to us about what was your first investment, and where has your personal investment gone since then?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. I've been so blessed with being in the right profession, but it's like the plumber who has a leaky tap. I mean, just because you work in finance doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to have a portfolio that's absolutely killing it. So I think if I look back on my first investments, I want to say that the first ones I were buying were shares. So shares at the time was much easier. I was early 20s, so I didn't have the capital behind me at that stage to go straight into the property markets. And we were still in, when I moved to Melbourne, we were still double digits interest rates. So I think I moved to Melbourne, I was on about 65 grand a year as a package. Property in Melbourne was certainly higher than moving from WA at the time. But in hindsight, obviously, I wish I probably had bought a dozen properties when I moved to Melbourne. So I started buying King Island cheese. I think was the first stock that I actually bought. I got in and was dabbling around and read some reports and did a bit of research. And I think at the time there was something happening with that particular company, and that was my first sort of foray into it. And then getting into BHPs of the world and obviously the banking stocks, some insurance stocks. But I also did things like Medico, stocks as well, and they, a couple of those really bombed. When you're chasing the quick gains rather than maybe just looking at the fundamentals of what makes a good sound investment. So I did a lot of the stock side of things when in my early 20s. Before, in my later 20s, especially when it came to Melbourne, I was on a generous rental package. So I had that sort of thing sort of covered. But then it was like, well, I don't want to be doing this forever. So then I bought my first property in East Bentley here down in Melbourne. It was a 2-bedroom unit on a split block. $290,000, I think the entry price is. I think it's worth about $750 now. Yeah. So that's it's done really well. But it was like anything at 25 or 26, 27 years of age. You want the 2-story house and the fridge that makes ice and the 2 cars in the driveway. But I'd come from an upbringing where I wanted to get in. I didn't want to overcommit myself from a leverage perspective. I wanted to be able to have. I'm relatively conservative in that perspective of I don't want to have this massive debt obligation and not still have a lifestyle and overcommit and from a risky strategy point of view. So getting into a smaller property first, I remember paying LMI at the time, so lender's mortgage insurance, and people saying, why would you do that? I'm going, well, a $4,000 or $5,000 outlay to get into a $300,000 asset that's going to in a growth corridor, it's a no-brainer.
Totally. And if you borrow it, it's only costing you
20% deposit. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're chasing your tail because if the
and since then, bought more properties. Obviously, the house that I'm in here, we are back on looking out over a golf course at the moment in Heatherton, which is beautiful.
Nice.
We've got another one here in Cheltenham, and as I was saying earlier to you before we started, I bought one a couple of years ago in Glenelg South in South Australia.
Yeah,
I use a buyer's agent firm here in Melbourne to source the properties.
Yeah.
And at that time, Melbourne property prices were obviously going through the roof, and we were looking at entry points, obviously, and the yield curves. And South Australia was offering really great entry points with really consistent growth, although it be lower than some of the other states.
Yeah.
At that time, it was the consistency I was looking for. So I'd gone through a separation, my first marriage. I'd offloaded, obviously, one of my properties and needed to replace it. So I'd spent some time with my BA. They'd done an analysis on what I was looking for, rang me on a Thursday afternoon and said, we've found one. Do you want to go ahead? I said, look, the only question I've got, because I know these guys well, I said, would you buy it if I don't? And they said, yes. I said, fine, buy it. And they bought it. So that was on the Saturday, and I haven't seen it since. But it's going very well. We've got a great tenant. The property manager that we use is integrated with the buyer's agent firm.
Right.
They do everything for me. I've got a relatively relaxed approach to my tenants in the sense of, if they look after the property, I'll look after them. So I've set a cap for things like maintenance and things with my property agent just to get things done. Don't wait. Get it done. Keep my client happy. So
yeah, perfect. You sort of mentioned during that discussion that you sort of started to learn what makes a good investment. You happy to share what your criteria are for those that might be interested in that?
Yeah, I think the thing that we've always really struggled with when it comes to investing is that, we lead with the heart and that emotional attachment. And as I used to say to people when I was an advisor, we, especially when it comes to Australians, we rock up to primary school or preschool and we stand in front of the Australian flag and we pledge allegiance to be obsessive compulsive about owning our own house in this country. And we do everything we can in our lifetime to achieve this goal. Yet there are countries and continents around the world where, home ownership or property ownership is the furthest from their mind. They have multi-generational wealth creation strategies that sit outside of property because, European models where property is owned by the few or it's owned by the banks. That's why you see those little plaques and stuff in a lot of European countries on the front of the door. And it might say, Credit Suisse or Deutsche or, we don't necessarily have a very healthy outlook on property when it comes to this country around, because it's tangible, we can see it, we can kick it, we can touch it. It makes it more real. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Just because you don't go down to BHP's head office here in Melbourne and kick the building and want to poke the CEO, doesn't make it less of an investment. So that's where I take that attitude of, if it's an investment, it's an investment. I check the emotions at the door. I'm interested in two things or three things: yield, growth, and tax. I don't buy my assets on tax strategies. I buy them for yield and growth, and I want that combination of things. So check the emotions at the door is what I always tell people: is you just can't get emotional about this. And if I was to give advice to people about how they approach their investments, it's all in the data. I don't think, from my perspective, unless I wanted to commit a lot more time to it, there's no such thing as an easy investment. If it was easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah.
Why do you think of the 2.1 million odd investment property owners in Australia, there's 70+% of them, 80% of them only own one, right? They get into something, it's a little bit hard, or it's not necessarily what they expected, so they don't go and do it again. So no different from when I bought I bought stocks. Not all of them have gone up. I've taken a bath on a few. Doesn't stop me from doing it again. So one is do your investigation. A lot of the really good, rich information that you'll find sits in the data, whether that be for property or shares or your super platforms.
Yep.
And the other one said just keep that emotions in check and be really clear about what your goals are. I think the old set and forget strategies these days, I think you've got to be really careful about just letting something sit forever and a day. In the property markets, from a broker perspective, when I teach brokers about how to have great conversations with clients, the worst conversation a broker can have with a client or a bank home loan specialist can have with a client is asking the question of how much do you want to borrow? The customer's always going to say as much as possible. The first question they should be asking is, why that property? What's your strategy for that property? What other properties have you considered? I see that your daughter's, I've got a 13-year-old, the next property we want to buy is next to the school. Well, if she's 13 and she's only got a few more years of school, is this a 5-year investment or is this a 10-year plan? What are you going to do once she's moved out of home? Did you want to downsize? I mean, have real discussions about the why you're getting into this. So I think people need to take more of a strategic approach to their investments rather than the ad hoc, just because the Joneses are doing it. And we've just seen that obviously over the last couple of years with the property market, especially with things like off the plan. They can be fraught with dangers if you don't do your research and you don't clearly understand the why you're getting into that particular asset or asset class. You can really find yourself in some trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice there, Jason. Jason, you've obviously got a fairly clear vision yourself on where your investment's going to take you. Are you sort of happy to share with us what your dream lifestyle looks like?
Yeah, sure.
Does it vary from what your current lifestyle is? And in addition to the property side, what are you investing in that's going to get you from where you are to where you want to be? And you may even be there already. If you're mentoring, you can afford to give back, then you're probably there already. But we'd love you to share that with us if you don't mind.
I think it's such a fascinating question, and I think the challenge that most people have is it's managing the time in which it takes to make real decisions. So we leave things until a statement turns up for your super, or we'll check in once a year when your tenant's renegotiating their rent or they're signing a new contract. I'm a visual management person, so I like to have that. We have a visual goals board in our house where we say, right, this is what we want, and there are buckets. There's a lifestyle bucket, and there's a finance bucket, and there's a family bucket. And I think having really clearly defined perspective about where you want to go and what you want to do. So from our perspective, my wife, Annalie Blundell, she's an executive coach, author, keynote speaker. She's one of the best in the industry. So we're very much in the same buckets as far as our careers go. But as far as we're on the same page also when it comes to our finances. So, we want 10 properties in our portfolio, and that's what we're on track to get a couple every sort of 24 months. We want to buy one every year and a half. We want to increase that passive income requirement in our portfolio so that we can choose the time and places at which we work. And that's one of the reasons why with the role that I have now, it gives me the opportunity to work with people that I love, doing something that I love in the places that I love. So I don't have to be here in Melbourne all the time to do my work. I can be in Perth visiting my family, I can be in Bali surfing, and I can still be producing output. So I've found a niche in the market that allows me to provide a good inconsistent revenue stream that comes from my working life to help me build my financial future through my investment portfolio. Mm-hmm. So at the moment, the focus is definitely around the property side of things. I do love a bit of volatility. So when markets are benign and flat, that worries me. But when they're going up or down, that's the exciting bit. So yes. The property markets are pretty exciting. The equities one is it's a bit like a forced savings plan. So just that constantly buying quality stocks in the background. My super, since becoming self-employed, I've made a decision around a debt reduction strategy over additional contributions into my super at this stage, especially with that recent introduction of, is it legislation? Is it 293? I can't remember the top of my head, the number.
Yep.
That once you hit over X percent, you're now paying 30%.
Yes.
So even as an ex-financial advisor, I've always been a little concerned about super. I love the ideology of a forced savings plan, but the piece around thinking about where governments are going and how governments interact and how we work with budgets, knowing that there's a pool of money there that they can access for things like additional taxation has always really worried me. Yes. And now it's coming to fruition where that tax pool effectively is something that the governments are going to continue to sort of stick their hand back in and reach into. And as much as a little bit cynical, I'm just a little bit cautious of having to wait another 22 more years until I'm 67 before accessing my money. I like a little bit more control than that. So at the moment, super's plodding away. It's nice and aggressive in my risk portfolio there. Direct equities and obviously expanding my property portfolio while I develop out my business.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, it sounds some great learnings from all of that in terms of the diversification and the change in the strategy over time, which is, as you've well pointed out, nothing is set and forget. You need to be
But I do seek advice on all those things. I mean, I don't do this on my own. So the one bit, especially with like a buyer's agent as an example, I use a company called Performance Property out of Melbourne with Phil Almeida and Dave McMillan. I mean, these guys are absolute experts in their field.
Yeah.
And I don't profess to be the expert when it comes to buying property in South Australia, as an example.
Yeah.
Or, what's happening. They've been buying a lot of stuff in Ballarat over the last year. Now, it costs money to do these things, but the value that I get by allowing me to focus on my value-based activities, so my business, versus having to go and spend weeks or months and trying to research property on my own. I can't tell you how much I value the advice piece. Go to professionals that live and breathe this stuff, and pay a premium for it. I mean, that's the value.
Yeah.
And then I don't have buyer's remorse.
Yes.
Because I've invested into a process. It's not just this ad hoc, thumb in the air or finger in the air, picking an asset out of the mid-air and going, well, I'll buy that one, and then wondering why it doesn't work out.
Yeah, awesome thoughts there, mate. Now, you sort of mentioned earlier in our chat, way back when you're 23 or 24, your first mentor really assisted you at a fairly critical time, and what a great tangible way to assist you with a stress ball that you're squeezing every day. Pretty smart thinking. Talk to us about who else have been your mentors on your journey so far, and then talk about why you've decided to go down that path yourself.
I think you get to a point in your life, and I think mine was in my early 30s, where the arrogance and the bravado probably dissipates faster, especially for men as well, because, I mean, the adult male brain, develops so much slower than the female brain. So in your mid-20s and even until your late 20s, early 30s, you're still not fully developed. So I think I got to a tipping point where how we measured success through things like league tables and forums and trophies and stuff was, and the title on your business card became so much more irrelevant in my life. And there was probably a couple of jolts along the way in my career where I've gone, actually, you know what, I should probably listen more and talk less. And I came across a line manager of mine who, I won't mention his name. He wasn't a great manager, but he came from a sort of McKinsey's background. But what he was really good at was recognizing what he was good at. And he wasn't good at managing. So he said, look, this isn't my core strength. Here's a budget. Go away and find a coach. So I did that, and at the time I was working with someone who I'm still very close friends with these days, Dougal Christie Johnson. He runs a company called Seventh Wave. And at the time, he was a new coach. He'd been coaching within large organisations under a corporate model, and he split off to do his own business. And he started a coaching model it was called a board meeting. So what we would do effectively is we go surfing. I had this budget to hire this coach, and we'd go surfing. And what he was actually doing for me is that we would spend an hour in the car driving to where we're going surfing, and we would download what's happened over the last month. What are some of your frustrations? What are the challenges you're up against? And we'd have this. It was an opportunity for me to get all this stuff off my chest and talk a little bit more about my frustrations. We'd then spend an hour or two surfing, and we're in a state where you've got high serotonin, high endorphin release. So you're at this utopic sort of state where we talk about family, and you're talking about balance and all the things that are important to you personally. Yeah. And then on the way home, we'd spend another hour looking at next steps, goals for the next month. What are you going to achieve? How are you going to do these sort of things? Love it. It was a new model for this guy, for Dougal, and I can't tell you how much I loved and appreciated the time that I'd spent with him for that following sort of 12 months, and pretty much we've been doing laser coaching and coaching by stealth and a decade after. So Dougal's probably my first real formal coach. Yeah. I'd done sort of stuff internally within ANZ at that time. I was desperate and thirsty for learnings. I wasn't a prolific reader. I think I'd spent so much time reading textbooks through university and manuals and SME or subject matter sort of expert manuals for the industry writing. I wasn't really passionate about reading. Yeah. But it did start to trigger my thirst for learning more and where I would go and get that information. So I said Dougal was my sort of first foray in, and then as my career developed, as it really did take off once I started to get coaching, and I won't say that was the only reason, but I certainly credit it to a major reason for my career development and trajectory going the way it did, was being open to learning, B, other people's opinions, but then also testing and learning, going back and really testing. I had a staff of, I think, 31 staff at that time, a $2 billion book in private bank, and I was a new manager, and I had this live fire environment where I could go away and test all my learnings from my coach. And I remember my team used to say, "Oh God, he's been coached again," and now he's come back and he's got his voodoo doll, and he's going to ask coaching questions. And so I was really blessed to have a really supportive structure around me. And then from there, I've had other wonderful coaches. Rob Bell who's a very good, one of my best friends, someone I look up to for the last 15 years. He's the CEO of 86-400, the new neobank out of Sydney. Yep. He was a senior, executive at ANZ as well. We also surf together. I've done surf trips overseas with Rob. But again, one of these guys, he's the smartest guy in the room. When he's talking, listen. Stop talking. Start really breathing in. Start asking more questions. So I've been blessed with people like him in my life. And then obviously marrying an executive coach certainly didn't go astray. So having Annalee in my life has been an incredible, not just a journey, but a realisation of what's possible, again, when you surround yourself with people that have been on a huge journey themselves. I mean, she has some of the best mentors and coaches, not just in Australia, but globally, she has access to. As I said, I mentioned people like Matt Church and Pete Cook, the thought leaders community. I'm surrounded by executive coach and mentors all the time, and these people are just fascinating. Whether they're coaching on the healthcare medical practices to IT and artificial intelligence to, I've been lucky enough to go and do tours with people like Amanda Stevens, Chris Helder, awesome. Pete Abraham. Wow. These people are just, I get goosebumps every time I see them present. Every time I get to sit next to them, I feel like I'm talking to a rock star. And these people are just genuinely beautiful people looking to share fabulous content, spread the message that they truly and passionately believe in. So the mentoring thing for me it's been such an important part of my life, but the biggest thing was being open to it, and being open to learning and realising that, you don't know it all, and that if you're open to growing, then the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, brilliant. You mentioned Anna Lee as part of that mix.
Mm-hmm.
How important do you believe she has been to your success so far, mate?
I probably couldn't even put it into terms. The ability to have someone who has the knowledge around the psychology of human behaviour, a communications expert, especially again from a male's perspective. If we had to rate men and women as against each other head to head on who was a better communicator, I can tell you that men don't fare that well. Traditionally, we stuff a lot of emotions down, and we hold on to a lot of things, and being with someone who again understands the psychology and the how of communication and the techniques that you can use to really open up and communicate at a deeper level has opened up, not just on my personal side, for someone who maybe has been a little bit more reluctant to share their feelings, to not always talk about the losses or the failures, to really celebrating those parts of my life and being with someone who then you can really look at things like root cause and the diagnostics, and you sit back and understand, analyze, learn, grow, and move on, and then they become your successors. So Anna is extremely well read, well studied, globally trained. So I feel like I've almost cheated a little bit by marrying, an expert in the field. But I don't take it for granted.
Love it.
She pushes me.
Yeah.
I push her to be better.
Yeah.
But what I love is probably the breadth of exposure that I get. That we talk about topics that I probably would have never thought about or delved into, and how then that can relate back to the business that I run or the philosophies that I live by, which has been truly amazing.
Yeah, absolutely awesome, mate. Now, you had enjoyed a fantastic and successful career so far, making that what would appear from the outside for some people a courageous jump from going from MD of ALEC to Broker Essentials. Yes, you've surrounded yourself with mentors, but taking that leap is a big one. Why have you done it, and why particularly focus on the finance broking fraternity?
Sure. Look, the challenge I think for the industry that I work in with finance is that there's 17,000 brokers, there's 6,000 brokerages, and effectively what we sell is homogenous debt product. So that's the end result. There's a real gap in the industry how we train our people. So, the Cert 4 and the diploma for when brokers come into the industry, the benchmark's just not high enough. So we've got relatively low barriers to entry for people coming in.
Yeah.
Yet we play such an important role as custodians when it comes to the financial fitness of the Australian population that there's not a correlation between necessarily the overall quality of the advice that's coming out of the industry and the need for that quality advice by the customer. So we don't necessarily triage the brokers coming into the industry well enough, but then once they're in, we don't necessarily have the support structures or the knowledge base that's been able to help small business owners grow and scale their business to the levels that they would like.
Yeah.
Because there's not the level of industry experience out there in that space. So one of the reasons that we came up a couple of years ago, it was nearly 3 years ago now, that when I started the company was based off the back of some of the advice that was coming out of the coaching, mentoring fraternity within the industry was just bad advice. They were talking about things like, writing a book to give you more credibility. When you go and do seminars, you can be introduced as an author, and that will give you credibility to your clients. And I'm like, that's just bad advice. The average broker only writes 20 to 40 loans a year. They write $15 million a year. They need to delight the customers that they have. They've got to stop chasing down Facebook leads and get better contact and connection with the clients that they have, because we know that 65 to 70% of customers that we deal with come through referrals. So this is all about really making our customer base feel safe. So the decision to leave, a stable, successful job wasn't easy, and Annalie took me on that journey, and part of that was coming out of, Annalie comes again from that thought leaders community where, they run thought leader practices, and there's a model. I mean, there's a process, there's a structure that goes to these things. And when you've got those things in place, taking that leap to go into your own business is much easier, knowing that there's actually a process. And if you follow the process and you enact the behaviours and you keep focus on your goals, the model can work quite well, and it doesn't feel as hard as it probably could be. So the jump wasn't overly difficult in the end. I had the positioning in the market as far as the several years that I'd been running the number one brokerage in the country. People were desperate to know what we were doing and what I'd put in place. But more importantly, I'm able to give them practical and usable tools that they can put into their business today. So there's a difference between being that practitioner in the business. So I call it the golden hour. Brokers will spend, if you're buying a property and you've got a 60-day settlement, there's 1,440 hours in a 60-day settlement. The broker might spend 1 or 2 or 3 hours face to face with you, and I call those, as I said, the golden hours.
Yeah.
But there's 1,437 other hours which they're a business owner, and they need to run a practice. That's marketing, HR, compliance, risk, finance. But that's the bit from an Australian point of view with our 2.1, 2.2 million small business owners. We're not necessarily teaching business owners how to run a business. They're really good at that one thing, the truly passionate piece that they love, that client interaction. But the rest of it, not so good at. And that's the bit that the Broker Essentials program focuses on. So
Love it. Now, before we sort of delve more into the mentoring side of the equation, while we're talking about the broking fraternity, given you've had personal experience and success in that regard, but also now mentored and rubbed shoulders with a lot of the brokers in the marketplace, for someone listening in who either hasn't used a broker or hasn't had a successful experience with a broker, what are the things that distinguish a really good broker from a not so?
Look, it's a brilliant question, and one that no matter what business you're in, especially if you're not well, you can be B2B, but if you are business to client B2C, it's how you make the customer feel. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
The best brokers, the best relationship people make their customers feel safe. So if you've ever read the book called Red Ocean, Blue Ocean, which is about creating markets where ones don't currently exist, if you talk about all the reasons why the 42% of customers out there, or 40-odd% of customers who currently use the banks, and the 60-odd% of customers who use brokers, if you distill all the reasons why they use those particular channels, so why they use a bank or why they use a broker or why they don't use a bank and why they don't use a broker, if you distill all the reasons around from convenience and price, location, advice, service, communication, etc., but if you distill it into a feeling, the feeling is safety. How did that customer make me feel? I want to feel safe, that I've made a good decision investing in my time with the broker. They're going to go away and they're going to do the right thing. They're going to get my debt structure and strategy right for me, and they're going to take me on this process that is effectively, it's an intermediary process. We're not the end result. So if the property is the end result, the piece of asset that we're excited about, the finance, people don't get generally too excited about getting massive amounts of finance or home loans. It's generally quite detrimental. So, but what we want to do is we want to make sure we take that customer on a journey. So, the best ones out there, the ones who are truly clear on their why they're doing their job, what the business they're in and why they're in it, they make their customers feel safe, and they're the ones who I'll be going to.
Yeah, I love that, mate. That's a really good way to sum it up, and a really good way for people who are investing in property or leveraging money for any purpose to start thinking about it. Brilliant. Awesome. Well, let's get back into a deep dive into mentoring, because, as I said at the outset, every successful person I've either known or read about has relied on mentors to really achieve success. What's a good mentor for you? What does it mean?
Look, the question around mentoring, and this is the challenge with even the word itself. I think it's the challenge with the word is I don't think a lot of people really know what it means, and it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. So when I talk about mentoring, I always say, look, do you need a mentor or do you need a coach? Do you need a trainer or do you need a manager? Right? There's a real big, do you need a consultant? There's a big difference between all of those sort of things. Because I think a lot of the times when people get into mentoring, they might think it's about regaling their wonderful stories and how wonderful I am, and they call that mentoring. And I go, well, actually, that person needs coaching. They need to be asked questions about, well, what could you do, or how would you have done this differently, or if you had these resources, what would you have done? You know, where they're doing the heavy lifting, versus consulting, which could be, here's my problem. I really don't have the time to solve it. Give us the answer and we'll go and implement it. So I think when it comes to mentoring, you need to be really clear on the why. So what you're looking to invest into it, and what you're looking to get out of it, more importantly. So when it comes to the importance of a mentor, the original communication around the expectation between the mentoree and the mentor is so important, so that you're on a clear journey together and that you're not wasting the time because your divergence in your path is going to take you down different areas. The mentor thinks they're doing a great job telling you these wonderful stories, but the mentee is sitting there going, I really need a practical solution in my thing, and what experience have you had around this particular thing, and show me how to do it. So I think that's a really important part of it, is good communication early, setting expectations about what the experience will look like.
Yeah, spot on, and adopting a very situational approach that respects where the individual's at, but also then adopting a mentoring, coaching, training, managing or consulting style that's appropriate to what that particular need is. So it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, and I love that, mate. Awesome. So with your mentor approach, sort of with that in context, and if some of our audience are recognising now the real need to lift their game or improve what they're doing, what should they be looking for in a mentor, and what questions do they need to ask to get them comfortable that they're talking to the right person?
And this is the challenge. I think there's two ways of looking at mentors. One is that you can look at them from a lateral point of view, so you can go a little bit wider and outside of your industry. I love that ideology. I love the ideology of different experiences, different industries to bring in creative thinking. I think sometimes we can pigeonhole ourselves and we can put the blinkers on and we get very caught up in our own industry, and we don't necessarily... we're not necessarily open enough to maybe respect the thoughts of others outside. Oh, well, you don't understand us, therefore you don't get us, therefore what you say isn't valuable. I think that's a bit closed-minded. I really do like that lateral view. Yeah. But on the flip side, especially for someone like myself, who's a subject matter expert in my industry, we lack the mentoring because of the credibility of those in the industry who haven't done what we do, because it is a very technical industry. So I think it's always worth having different views and having more potentially than one person, because then at least it opens you up to having a different thought process. But from especially with my style, I do gravitate between mentor, coach, trainer, facilitator, consultant, etc., depending on what it is that my people need. Yeah. Because, look, quite frankly, some of them just need an accountability buddy. Because the industry that I work in has around about 74% who are solo operators, what they're looking for is someone to help manage their decision-making process and help and hold them accountable for their actions from week to week, month to month. So, again, a lot of the journey that customers or mentees will need to take on board is they need to think about what it is that they actually want, and it can all be wrapped up into that one word mentor. But within that mentor, that compartmentalising different requirements is absolutely critical. But I do like the idea of people outside of your own industry. I think that can be really important.
Absolutely. I know in our own journey, Jason, in one of our previous business iterations, there was myself and two business partners, and we deliberately went outside of the broking industry because, one, we just didn't think the quality of mentoring that we were seeing was really going to help us much. But we actually identified someone who was well respected in the property side of the industry. So I understood the business model but not the intricacies, and what was fantastic with that is that they they could ask questions that we're so close to that you forget to ask.
Yes.
And just
and there's huge amounts of similarities as well, Bushy. I mean, real estate to accounting, to financial planning, to banking, all that sort of stuff. I sit there and go, those financial services, it's all about process, measure and manage, and customer.
Yes.
Process for everything that you do. Measure it so you can fix it and understand. It's like when the engine light comes on in the car, you understand why it's come on. It's not a surprise. You're never ambushed. It's always in the data. And having a really clearly defined client journey that takes the customer from end to end, understanding the consumer behaviours that sit behind it. What problem are you solving? What needs and aspirations do your clients have? What unmet needs are you trying to solve for? I mean, it's all very similar. So you don't necessarily need to be a technical expert within the industry that you're mentoring into. It certainly can help, but you can go away and do your research as well. So, but those sort of three fundamental things are something that I operate on a daily basis of. So
yeah, I love that. And it's the quality of the questions that's at the base of all of that, which is awesome. So if someone's the light's gone on for people listening today, and they go, right, yeah, I really now need to take the step. What are the other benefits of engaging a mentor, either formally or informally, do you believe?
Look, I think one of the challenges that we have in modern society, and we can call, you can say it's an excuse, but we have this, we are bombarded. Our cognitive ability, our brain tank, can only take so much information before you start going into overwhelm. So when we think about the stresses and what we're expecting, the saying of do more with less, it's a task shared is that task halved. I sit there and go, start thinking about sharing your experiences, start sharing your frustrations, your concerns, your wins, your challenges, your opportunities. But when you start bringing other people into the fold, it starts to take the pressure off. A lot of the time, what we're looking to do is we want to talk about our frustrations. We want to talk about why things aren't working, or we might want to celebrate a win, but we don't have anyone to talk to. So the further we use technology sometimes, the further we get away from the tribe. If you want to read, I love a lot of Seth Godin's works, and Tribes is one of my favourite books. We're desperate for a tribe, and leadership doesn't have to come from a top-down hierarchical point of view. It can be lateral, it can be subordinate. You don't have to have a leader on your business card. But when we think about the importance of community and tribe, especially when it even goes back to things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where food and shelter, of course, are critical, but tribe and community are now replacing that at the bottom rung of surrounding ourselves with people in a network that, we're better together. Willpower alone is not sufficient enough to get me through anymore. Peer power and actually working with people, as I said, to hold you accountable, to collaborate with, it's so much more powerful.
Love that. Yeah, absolutely brilliant, mate. The benefit of the tribe is absolutely key. No, absolutely fundamental on that score. Awesome, mate. Well, look, I really think you've opened our eyes and our ears to a number of things to think about, the benefits of mentoring, the benefits of taking a strategic approach to investing in your future. Sort of bringing it to a summary, I love to jump into what I call the ambush series, Jason, where or the bushfire lightning round, where I just ask 5 quick questions that the listeners keep asking me about.
Far away.
Yeah, and you've covered a couple of these already, so you've given us a couple of really good book references. But your favourite book, your favourite quote, and why to start with?
So my favourite quote, one from Mark Twain, the most important 2 days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. I absolutely love that. Especially for me, it resonates so well because when I created Broker Essentials, I found my why. And I don't think I've been, especially from a career-wise, I don't think I've ever been this happy when I've truly found my purpose.
Yeah, I can hear it in your voice. It's the energy and the passion just emanates, mate. So it's just awesome. Coming back to the book side of the equation, your favourite book that you'd recommend people read and why?
Look, I said I'm not a prolific reader. I love Audible, so I've got about 25 books on the go at the moment. And there's some, and I'll give you a few that I love. I mean, the Marshall Goldsmith one, Triggers, is an absolute favourite one of mine. From a business perspective, around productivity, the David Allen Getting Things Done is another really good one. Yeah. Look, if you're a leader, Brene Brown, Dare to Lead, is fantastic. She's an amazing woman. Mm-hmm. I'm actually currently listening to, is it Gary Vaynerchuk?
Yes.
The Crushing It one. Like, I'm not necessarily mad on his style, but he's got some really raw messaging in there. So there's some pretty good stuff in there.
Agreed.
And another one, again, all of Seth Godin's works, from Small as the New Big to The Purple Cow to Tribes. There's some really great books in there. And another one, a local author, which I also love, it's called The Game Changer by Jason Fox.
Yes.
Talking about the three sort of things to remember in business around setting goals, rules, and feedback. Yeah. So he's got a really good book, The Game Changer. So I've got lots of books on the go.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm a bookaholic when it comes to that. And podcasts and Audible are just great ways to make that more effective.
Use the downtime.
Yeah, spot on. Now, this one's a little bit left field, but it's a question that we constantly get asked because most Australians, rightly or wrongly, feel that they pay too much tax. What's the top thing that you've legally done to minimise the tax that you pay, mate?
It's a funny one. When I think about that question, I'll probably say the tongue-in-cheek answer. Well, I just earn more money. Because then it's a perspective, right? So So I like clean roads and houses and hospitals and all those sort of things. So I get that part. Look, from a financial advisor background, I think gearing has always been one that it's a no-brainer for me, and using leverage to do so. So whether that be through margin lending in the equity space, whether that be through buying investment properties, I've never wanted to wait 10 years or 15 years to buy the asset. And if I can do it soundly and safely through good loan to valuation ratios, through gearing, and have that ability there from a gearing perspective, whether that be negative, positive or neutral, that's been a bit of a no-brainer. But the other one also is, especially as a small business owner, is when I'm spending money now and being able to claim it back, I look at what I'm spending things on. So I'm always looking to spend money on development opportunities, whether that's for the business itself or through personal development. Yeah. I never balk now at a conference ticket price, or buying my Audible books, or flying up to Sydney to go and see a speaker. So that gearing side of things and spending wisely when it comes to deductible side of things, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. No, awesome suggestions there, mate. Now, coming back to the investment topic, what's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received?
Best piece of advice is, I think, was the old never be first in, never be last out. I think that's been a bit true. And I said I'm a little bit more conservative, so I like to set a little bit of track record on companies or asset classes before I jump right in. So I've never gone into things like fine timber or crab claws or olive oil. And I can tell you, as a financial planner, I've seen them all.
I bet.
The worst piece of advice is, look, it's a sure thing. I'm such a cynic when it comes to the sure thing side of things. The rich don't get rich because they're out there spruiking that I'm going to give it all away. By the time a lot of things have got to market, it's done its run. So I always like for people to ask more questions. Yeah. So if someone's selling me this sure thing, why are they selling it? Why are you getting out? I should be getting in. The sure thing, no such thing.
Yeah, 100%. Now, sort of breaking it down into your daily routines, what's a personal habit that you're happy to share that you believe contributes most to your personal success?
3 words: follow the process. Whether that's getting up in the morning, whether it's having a healthy breakfast, whether that's exercise, whether it's making appointments for clients, whether it's writing some new content, whether it's delivering a keynote, there's a process. So for all the things when we break them down, and I know it can sound quite unemotive, but there is generally a process for everything.
Yeah.
So that's my advice: is follow the process.
Yeah, absolute gold. It's not rocket science, and we've all heard it before, but very few actually do anything about it. That's the difference I find, mate. What do you believe has been your best and most worthwhile investments that you've made to date, and why?
Look, I think if you're looking straight balance sheet, look, property has been very good to me. But if I'm looking now for the longevity of my life, it's the investment in myself. The ability for my income and where it can go and my capabilities will far outweigh the returns that my properties can make.
Yeah.
So as much as I'm still investing in my properties as we speak, I'm investing and doubling down on myself.
Yeah, love it, and which is a great segue into the wrap-up question. That is, if you spoke to someone who's just leaving school, a bit like yourself back in Perth many years ago,
yep,
what would you advise them to invest their time, money and skills in to create their definition of freedom?
Look, it's such a fascinating and timely. It's almost coming to a debate sort of level now. Is that I'd be telling the school leaver now is to invest into being able to connect with other people. The art of connection and human connection is almost a dying art. We're losing the ability to be able to relate and to form relationships quickly. So, as much as I value traditional education models, especially for a school leaver leaving today who maybe didn't get the grades in their their VCE or whatever the what you want to call it in your state, don't despair. I look back on my career as a school leaver, as a C, B student who didn't get into university the first time round, didn't get the number that I needed into the economics course I wanted to get into. Yeah. Went and did another diploma in the meantime in business, came back and did my finance and marketing double degree, went on to get a CFP, DFP, did my master, like half off, didn't finish my masters. But all those sort of things, I put all that aside, and if I can connect and if I can have great conversations with people, that's going to be absolute currency going forward. So that's my advice.
Yeah, brilliant advice. It's funny, isn't it? The more that technology connects us, the further we get away from real conversations. It's interesting, and I think that is the challenge of the generation. Actually, is to relearn that art of relationship.
Well, if you see the kids at the restaurants or all sitting down, they're all on their phones, and that's the bit where I go where we're missing the opportunity to be in the moment. So great communication is about being present. So if you can focus, and that's I do a keynote literally on that subject alone on focus. What's the cost of distraction in your life and your business? When you think about the average adult in the UK now checks their phone over 200 times a day. In the US, it's between 80 and 150 times a day. Wow. So every 2 to 6 minutes, we're distracted. We're checking our phones for this magical something, this drug almost like this serotonin, this endorphin the hit that we're looking for. That's going to be the downfall of a lot of people in the next generation. So again, for someone who is great at communication, who is good at the art of human problem solving, that currency, that's going to be absolutely invaluable. So I have absolutely huge respect for the IT and the technology communities and what they're doing, and that's fantastic. But at the art of it, 120 years ago, we were all sort of still on horse and carts. Technology is advancing much faster than humans are advancing. So when it comes to getting left behind, the ability to relate to other individuals and to communities and to the tribe, I think that's going to be great currency. So interesting times ahead.
Great insight. Really good insight. Mate, tell us what's next new and exciting for you moving forward with Broker Essentials.
Look, Broker Essentials is continuing to get wider and bigger. So obviously we're a national firm. I've got clients in all states. The mentoring side of things is something that I'm passionate and absolutely love. So we'll continue to drive that part of the business. I do one-day masterclasses around the country, so we run about a dozen of those a year. So we'll continue to do those, but then how we scale that and additional support materials, we'll look to provide online materials in 2019 and 20. So that's probably the focus at the moment, is really now to solidify and back up what I've currently got to the market, and then provide more of an online portal as well.
Brilliant. And for those that you sort of prick their conscience in relation to, well, I don't necessarily need someone inside my industry as a mentor, and have warmed to what you've shared today. And I think your approach is a brilliant one, because taking a situational approach, asking the right questions, and then adopting a approach that's specific to an individual's needs is a rarity in the mentoring coaching fraternity. So if someone wants to reach out to you, Jason, to take advantage of your mentoring approach, what do they do, and how do they do that?
Easiest way these days is we're all online, so either through LinkedIn, my profile's up on there, obviously Jason Back, otherwise through jason@brokeressentials.com.au. They can get in touch with me. We are 24/7 these days, and like we all do, I've got my phone glued to me like everyone does, because we're all addicted. But no, I'm available for there. And generally we start off nice and easy. You start off with just a chat. What's important, the why. I get my clients to do a bit of pre-work, which gets them thinking a little bit more about what it is that they want to achieve and how they see my support helping them do that. But it's a relatively painless process.
Mate, absolutely love your insights, love your passion and your energy, love your way of breaking quite complex topics down into really easily digestible chunks. I know you're going to continue to do great things, mate, and looking forward to supporting you in that journey and rubbing shoulders with you to spread the message in that regard. So I really appreciate you spending some time today, mate. It's been awesome.
Absolute pleasure, Bushy.
Thanks, Jason. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Well, freedom fighters, how good was that? To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's hello@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/get invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you live forever and live as if you'll die tomorrow.